Hello, everyone. So, today, figured we get into some actual news that popped up. So, Hasbro officially announced the released images of Studio Series Battletrap and Rise of the Beasts Bumblebee. Um, Now, Battletrap we've seen before. He was one of the leaked images that came out along with Studio Series Air Razor. Um, but Bumblebee is a new release, and it's a new mold too. You notice not that like the upper body might have the same engineering, but the lower body is entirely different from the well. It looks a little different from the look from what we usually have as far as Bumblebee figures go. The chest is definitely different in some form. But this got me thinking about designs in the Transformers movies and how people generally have very differing opinions on the designs themselves, which has brought up some controversy with the design for Optimus Prime in the Rise of the Beasts movie. With people having their own issues, I personally think the design itself is good overall. I just don't like the fact that he has the hand that transforms into a gun like what Bumblebee does, and I don't like that he has his mouth. I understand why they might have included the mouth just so he can emote more, or it can be read how he's emoting more, but those are my personal issues with the design. Otherwise, I think it's a pretty good design. I think it's a good combination of the Bay movies and the G1 cartoon, because it alters the G1 designed to where it's not quite as blocky. It's a bit more humanoid, but it doesn't stray so far away like the Last Night and Age of Extinction designs did. So today, because of this thoughts on design and stuff like that, I figured that today's video would be what makes a good Transformer design slash toy. Now, I'm including toys here because the design does affect the toys, and sometimes the other way around. The toy affects the design. A good example of the latter is when they were making Transformers Cybertron. They modeled the CG models in the show after the toys. So that's a good example of the toys affecting the design of the show. So, moving on from that, we have number one, a good combination of the robot and the vehicle mode. Now, what this means is that you have a robot mode that clearly has visible car parts on it. Now, there is such thing as going too far with it, and I think that's something that a lot of the people who grew up watching the movies are having is it's too blocky for Optimus Prime at least. But for me personally, a good combination is the number one thing, because that's going to determine how good the toy comes out. In the case of Battletrap, he looks amazing, and that's because the entire front end of his truck turns into his chest. So, but there are figures and designs that don't have enough car parts on them. So, let's look at some of those. Here we have what a bad combination looks like. Now, this is Movie 1 Megatron. Movie 1 Megatron turns into a jet. Now, you wouldn't be able to know that if you just saw this picture and I asked you, what does he turn into? If I went up to the average person, now of course the people who've seen the first movie know what he turns into, but if I just went up to the average person, showed them this picture and said, what does he transform into? They probably wouldn't be able to tell me. Because there's no plane parts visible. Like, yes, it's a Cybertronian jet mode, but it still needs to have parts of a jet on him so that we can see, oh yes, it's a jet. And here we have the Age of Extinction / The Last Night Optimus Prime. Now, this is a really good robot mode design. The issue is that the only car parts you have to show for it are the exhaust pipes right here. There's not near enough of the actual car on him in order to make it a good combination. There's no way you can make a toy out of this design. This is, of course, the unique toys, but that's a third party. They are making figures specifically for stuff like this, whereas your general release from Hasbro, every time a figure from this design was released, it had a massive backpack on it because they just did not have a good enough model to build a toy off of, and that's due to a change in designers concept artists for the movie. So, with that being said, let's move on to what a good combination looks like. And we're still using I'm mostly going to be basing all of this on the live action movies. Ironhide is a really good design. Clearly visible car parts. There's wheels here. There's wheels here. You can clearly see that this turns into something. This is not just a robot that happens to turn into something. This is a robot that is formed from something else. And another live action one, we have Blackout. Blackout is one of the best designs from the live action series. You can clearly see the helicopter rotors, the helicopter motor, the front end of the helicopter, the little exhaust jets. These are what a good combination of a robot and a vehicle look like. So, there are others. Barricade is a good design because the entire car side makes up his arms and his chest is made up of the front end of the car. That's a pretty good combination. I just wish they executed it better on the toys. So, number 2, is the design recognizable as the character? Now, what does this mean? Well, I have some figures here to show you. This is RC. This is from the Revenge of the Fallen movie. This is not recognizable as any RC ever to be released. The only thing you would recognize this as is the live-action Revenge of the Fallen RC character. She was barely in the thing. Whereas you have the Bumblebee movie toy, which is clearly recognizable as RC. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, is this just a model that they created and just slapped a character's name onto without really thinking about it? So let's get to some examples. These designs that are recognizable, and I'm using the movie 1 through 3 Optimus Prime because this is probably one of the best, this is how you... I'm trying to think of the words here. Sorry, I will get them eventually. Let's just talk about Starscream. This is clearly Starscream. Like, there's no mistaking this for anyone else. Like, this is 10 out of 10 design-wise. This is how you execute a design perfectly. This is how you modernize an 80s cartoon design, especially for a Transformer. When it comes to this is how I would say you alter a design while still keeping it recognizable. He still has the base things. He still has the front end of the truck for his chest. He still has the wheels by his feet. He still has the wheels on his hips. You know, it's the small things like that. It's the details like that that still make this recognizable as Optimus. Plus, obviously, the colors and the mouth plate help, but he doesn't usually have the mouth plate on in the movies unless he's fighting. But it's those things like that make this a recognizable design, even though it's not, or a recognizable design as Optimus Prime, even though it isn't a copy of the G1 design itself. But on the flip side, you have non-recognizable designs. And I gotta give, I have to take some points away from Bumblebee. This is not Blitzwing. This is not what Blitzwing looks like. I don't think there's ever been a carnation of Blitzwing that looks like this. This is not So many people, when I first saw the Bumblebee movie trailer released, so many people thought this was Starscream. So many people thought this was Starscream, and I kind of understand why, because he does have the same basic shape and he does have the similar colors. He's just missing the bright blue. He does have blue on him, but like this is not. But when people found out it was Blitzwing, they were like, "What? Huh?" Yeah, no. This is not recognizable as Blitzwing. It's a good design, and it's great for this point. It does have a good combination of the robot and the vehicle, but it's not recognizable as the character it's representing. This is a case of they had a CG model and they just slapped a name onto it. Which, once again, most people who grew up with the movies probably tell you this is Starscream, but anyone who knows Transformers, like, pre-2007, this is not Starscream. Even the designs that strayed away from G1, like Armada, you could still semi-recognize it as Starscream because it had the same basic colors. It was the red and the white, mostly, with some blue and maybe some black. This is just a gray blob. This is just a gray mess of shrapnel and metal, which all the Decepticons were. If you watch Dark of the Moon, you can't tell what Decepticon is where and who that Decepticon is. So this is not recognizable as Starscream. More and more people are starting to recognize it as Starscream, but this is not recognizable as the character of Starscream. So, do I have anything over here? Yeah, no. So, these two and her are examples of designs that do not resemble the character they're supposed to be representing. Number 3, do the compromises in either mode make sense? Now, this is more focused towards the toys themselves, and I do have some examples here. This is basically saying, like, is the robot mode clean enough? And is the vehicle mode, are there not a lot of car parts or robot mode parts showing on the vehicle mode? So basically, is the vehicle mode clean, and is the robot mode still recognizable, and is it not just a robot with a backpack slapped onto it? So here are some examples. These are some figures with bad compromises. Now, Galvatron here you can't really see, but luckily I have him off to the side here. Galvatron here looks pretty good in vehicle mode, or in robot mode. And the issue is that the compromise they made for that was his robot mode feet are just sticking off the top of the back of his vehicle mode. It's not even like there's a hinge where you could fold these flat and just kind of hide it. No, they're stuck like this. And you know, it's things like that I'm talking about. Ratchet here, great vehicle mode, but the railing on the top of his vehicle mode is just dangling off his back, and it doesn't even attempt to be. They don't even attempt to hide it. It's literally just sitting off the back. No matter how you look at it, you can still see it. Of course, I have a dark background here, so you can't really see it here, but yeah, it's things like that. It's design choices or engineering choices that could have been fixed, but they just didn't for some reason. And we'll get to some figures with some good compromises. Bumblebee, regardless of QC and everything like that right now, we'll get to that in a second, but with just this figure on its own, there's pretty good compromises that were made. Yeah, he has a bit of a backpack, but it folds up very nicely, very clean. There's almost no robot parts hanging off the vehicle mode. This is an example of good compromises that were made. Likewise, the second and third release of Optimus Prime here is also an example of compromises that were made. He looks good in vehicle mode. Of course, his feet are just sitting on the back of his vehicle mode, but they at least lay flat, which all Optimus Prime toys do that. And the only real compromise that was made was, in order to clean up his chest, is that his backpack sticks out just a little bit further. That's it. Like, that's really the only thing that was compromised, was that the backpack sticks out like not even a full half an inch, like a quarter of an inch further than in the Revenge of the Fallen release. These are both examples of figures that made compromises that made sense, you know? So, moving on. Good quality control and articulation. These are both very important. These are equally important to each other. If a figure has really good quality control, but you can't do anything with them, that's not a good figure. If a figure has really good articulation, but falls apart every time you try to use it, that's a bad figure. So let's go to our first example, which I mentioned earlier. Bumblebee has really good articulation, but there are so many quality control problems with this guy. Any clear plastic part is prone to breakage. I have him over here at Barricade, which I swear at some point I will stop ranting about this guy. He has really good articulation. He full 360 at the arms, bicep swivel, good elbows. He's got in and out at the wrist. He's got a good range of motion in the legs. Got a double jointed knee and an ankle. But the main issue is this backpack is. Let's see if I can see that right there. That is a clear plastic ball joint socket. Now, that is so prone to breakage. I mentioned in a video before, I've seen at least 10 photos of that guy with his backpack snapped off, and people cannot get it reattached because that socket broke. So So yeah, that's an example of a figure that has good articulation but bad QC issues. And on the flip side, we have figures with good QC but bad articulation. Now, a lot of people might be weirded out by the choice here. Revenge of the Fallen Scavenger looks like he does on the screen, has good QC. I've never heard of anyone having any breakage issues. There might be one or two, but that is not widespread enough for me to be like it's a widespread issue. It's more your mileage may vary thing. But you can't pose him. You can't really get into any poses with him because of the design itself. This design does not allow for a ton of poses. And the fact that he's a triple changer limits him even further. Really, all you have, articulation-wise, you have a ball-jointed head, which cannot look side to side very far. That's about the maximum you'll get. You have a ratcheted shoulder, a bicep swivel, and then an elbow joint, and then this finger joint here. And these do swing up and down, but that's more for transformation than anything else. Really, the only articulation you have are in his arms. That's it. Like, you can adjust the wheel up top, but like that's it, really. The only useful pose you can get him in is him just standing there. Or you can make it look like he's drifting, which is really just him falling over and catching himself on his arm. So yeah, this is an example of a figure that has really good QC, but is lacking in the articulation department. And then we have figures like this, which is just bad in both regards. This thing falls apart and you can't get it in any poses. You can see here, this is a very awkward pose they have her in. Arms like to pop off. The front end of the vehicle likes to pop off. Paint chipping out the ass on this guy. The way the leg kibble folds up prevents any motion at the waist other than a forward and back. The knees are blocked by that kibble. There are just so many. And by the way, when I say the front end pops off, I'm talking about these little wing pieces here. But there's just so many issues with this figure that it's bad in every regard. Unlike this guy, who has good QC and articulation, Dark of the Moon Sideswipe is one of the best deluxe class figures to come out of the Studio Series line in general. Like, regardless of how you feel about the paint job or anything like that, this thing cleans up so good, has such good QC. I haven't heard of anyone having any breakage issues. The articulation is good. He has shoulders. He has good shoulder articulation, bicep swivel. He's lacking in the wrist, but that's about it as far as the arms. Head's on a ball joint. Ball jointed waist that actually works. Double jointed knees, and then an ankle forward and back at the ankle here. I think he might even have a waist swivel. I'm not sure about that. I need to transform him and get him in here to see. But yeah, this is an example of a figure that has good QC and articulation. So, is that it? All right, that is all I have for you today. With all that, hang on, 1 second. I just saw this guy and forgot. So, figures with good compromises. Studio Series Jazz. Got a bit of a backpack on him, but it cleans up fairly nicely. It doesn't stick off of him all that bad, and he still has good articulation and nothing hangs out in vehicle mode. So, sorry, just a real quick sidestep. With that being said, that's all I have for y'all today. That, in my opinion, is what makes a good Transformer design / figure. So, I will see you guys some other time. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe, all that jazz. I will see you guys Friday. Guys, I need your help. Okay, so the algorithm is the #1 enemy of all YouTube channels. Any YouTube channel that's trying to start up or isn't pre-established is going to fail because of the algorithm. So what I need you to do, I need you to do 2 things. 1, I need you to hit like. 2, I need you to subscribe. If you don't do either of those things, this channel is not going to be able to stay afloat for very long. So please, like, subscribe, and if you really like me, you might leave a comment while you're at it. Thank you very much.